Stikeman Elliott, barristers and solicitors litigation lawyer, Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe, to accuse me of several different criminal acts in a cease and desist demand letter, which sought to intimidate me into removing blog posts from the Unitarian, from the Emerson Avenger blog that were critical of various things. You know, basically, they were all critical of bad behavior on the part of clergy, ranging from, you know, fairly low-level hypocritical behavior on the part of one Unitarian Universalist minister, through to obscene and sadistic sodomy fantasy posted to the internet by another Unitarian Universalist, to such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, to borrow a couple of choice phrases from Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe's arrogant and aggressive cease and desist demand letter. So in those criminal accusations, there was the accusation, and I'm just going to read out what the letter says from memory. It says, "Your unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape are defamatory." And it went on to say how my allegedly unfounded and vicious, allegedly defamatory statements were so defamatory, according to the UUA's Canadian attorney, Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe, that they constituted the criminal act of blasphemous libel. Now, prior to receiving that cease and desist demand letter, I did not even know that Canada had a blasphemy law. I had no idea that, you know, Canada had a law in the Canadian Criminal Code that prohibited, you know, blasphemous libel against a religious community. But it does. You know, within minutes, I'd Googled it and I'd found out a little bit about what it was all about. Within a few hours, I had a pretty good grip on the whole situation. But this is the interesting thing. This is where, I mean, it's bad enough. It's bad enough that the Unitarian Universalist Association would falsely accuse me of any criminal act in an effort to silence me. But Unitarian Universalism, which grew out of Unitarianism and Universalism, you know, prior to the merger in 1961, Unitarian Church was one church, Universalist Church was another church. They had, you know, somewhat different theologies, but they also had a fair number of similarities. In 1961, they merged. But prior to the merger, you had the Unitarian Church and the Universalist Church. And both churches, because they were somewhat heretical from a Christian perspective, the Unitarian Church denied the doctrine of the Trinity. The Universalist Church preached universal salvation. You know, according to the Universalist Church, you know, nobody go to hell. Eventually, everyone would be reconciled to God, kind of thing. As a result of having these non-orthodox beliefs, Unitarians and Universalists over, you know, the centuries had been accused of blasphemy, you know, or heresy or whatever. But definitely, you know, in a number of cases, Unitarians and Universalists were charged, tried, and convicted of violating, you know, the blasphemy laws of England or United States or individual American states and so on, various countries. Some were even executed. So one of the most famous cases was Servetus, who was basically burnt at the stake, if I remember correctly, for, you know, denying the doctrine of the Trinity. So essentially what it comes down to is Unitarian Church, the Universalist Church, have this long tradition of being strongly opposed to blasphemy laws that's centuries old, and in the 21st century they're accusing me of blasphemy. This is outrageous hypocrisy. And they're doing it to hide such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, one of them being Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell. but there are others. And we could also throw in religious educators. If we threw in religious educators of who are guilty of pedophilia and rape, indeed both at the same time, i.e., a religious educator or more who raped preteen children, i.e., a pedophile rapist, Unitarian Universalist religious educator, this is what the Unitarian Universalist was trying to hide by falsely accusing me of blaspheming against the Unitarian Universalist religious community, because I spoke of a few cases where people were actually charged, tried, and convicted of pedophilia and rape. Nothing the least bit unfounded about what I said. Nothing particularly vicious about what I said. I basically just related the facts. I didn't use all kinds of lurid language. I didn't stridently berate the pedophiles and rapists, etc. I just, this is what happened. These are facts. I might have used some slightly indignant language, but nothing that was improper or anything. Like basically, these are the kinds of things where indignation and even anger are very justified. So here we are in the 21st century, June 1st of 2012, and Unitarian Universalists are accusing me of blasphemy for one of the worst possible reasons to accuse a person of blasphemy. I should add that the Unitarian Universalist Association leaders who try to misuse Canada's blasphemy law to hide pedophilia and rape are atheists. So it's just like incredible, cynicism, hypocrisy, amorality, if not immorality. It's incredibly unethical. It's incredibly immoral. It's just pathetic. I think I've used that word before. And here's sort of the rub too. This is what gets interesting. The person, the Unitarian Universalist Association, official, who would have been most hands-on responsible for hiring Maitre Marc-André Coulombe to falsely accuse me of blasphemous libel, was the vice president, the executive vice president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. The president, Reverend Dr. Peter Morales, he would have authorized this, he would have approved it, but the person who would have done all the work, or at least would have overseen all the actual work of coordinating the legal work, was Kathleen K. Montgomery, executive vice president of the UUA. And what I find quite interesting is that if you go on the Unitarian Universalist Association website and you run a search on blasphemy on the UUA website, you will find a document from 2010. Of course, the church may at some point get rid of this document, but it's there now. It's been there for quite some time. This document is an amicus brief. This document is essentially a petition to a court signed on to by the Unitarian Universalist Association, signed on by other religious groups as well, but the Unitarian Universalist Association signed on to this amicus brief. And what does this amicus brief say? Well, the amicus brief was basically condemning the fact that a person was being accused of blasphemy, I think in Pennsylvania. I think it was Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I could be mistaken about that. It's not really all that relevant. What is relevant is that a person in the United States was, who had actually been charged, with one of the blasphemy laws of the states, the individual state blasphemy law. There's no national blasphemy law, to my knowledge. Unlike Canada, where it's a federal law, I think in the United States, blasphemy laws are at the state level rather than the national level. I'm not aware of any national United States blasphemy law, but there are state ones, vestiges from when they were British colonies and so on. So anyway, what it gets down to is that in 2010, Kathleen K. Montgomery and the UUA as an organization signed on to this amicus brief, which basically opposed and objected to the use of a state's blasphemy law against a person who, if I remember correctly, had named a bar or restaurant Hell's something or other, or hell was in the word. It's just kind of ludicrous thing anyway. Like, the guy, had a reference to hell in his name of his place of business, and he was charged with this blasphemy law. Well, what's interesting is, in addition to, in general, opposing this, which is entirely in alignment with what Unitarian Universalists, traditionally would do, the amicus brief concluded, or in the conclusion, it said that all blasphemy laws are unconstitutional. So here is the UUA in 2010 saying all blasphemy laws are unconstitutional. But 2 years later, they're falsely accusing me of violating Canada's blasphemy law in an effort to cover up and hide such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, committed by Richard Buell, because those were the only two Unitarian Universalists that had actually identified as rapists. And in the case of Richard Buell, a pedophile rapist, because that's exactly what they were. They were convicted of rape. Just insane behavior on the part of the UUA. So happy Easter, UUA. Happy Easter. I'm resurrecting all your shit today.